With the ongoing conflict in the South China Sea, we tend to think about possible scenarios such as, what if the United States went to war with China in the South China Sea? What will happen if war broke out? Why America will not go to war with China in the South China Sea? So, based from our research and critical analysis, we listed down 10 possible scenarios. First of all, the United States cannot afford to go to war at this current time or even in the near future. If America does so, it might lose the war. The United States is currently experiencing tremendous effects of the worldwide pandemic, and such effects might or possibly lead the country to face the largest depression in the history of capitalism. Furthermore, financial fallout of the pandemic will eventually harm the US defense budget for years to come. Thus, the current pandemic is placing the United States at a strategic disadvantage. Secondly, though America has the most powerful defense in the whole world, with its most advanced air and naval warfare, that includes radar system, long-range missiles, and army, doesn't mean they can defeat China. What perhaps America has to realize is China has a great advantage in the South China Sea's geography. Another thing is China had spent time, at least 20 years, studying and observing how the United States conducted several wars, such as the Gulf War in the 90s, Afghan and Iraq War, and because of these thorough studies, China is able to enhance its realistic war approach and strategies, establish a wide preparation if exactly a kind of conflict occurs, and eventually able to invest in defenses that could give America a hard win. A war would disrupt the South China Sea trade route, causing trade shipping incurs massive losses. If we check the major transit routes or sea lines of communication that offer entry into the South China Sea, the Strait of Malacca is by far the most commonly or widely used, considered the shortest and most economical trading route between the Pacific and Indian Oceans. If a war broke out, it will definitely disrupt shipping traffic, gravely endanger commercial vessels passing through the Strait of Malacca, and whether it will be a short-term or long-term peacetime disruption at the lie of the trillions of dollars of goods that transit the South China Sea each year is likely to happen. And not only that, a long-week closure of the Strait of Malacca would result in an estimated $64.5 million in additional shipping costs. Another important factor United States need to consider is the Taiwan issue. If United States attacks China in the South China Sea, Taiwan will be in deep trouble. One of the key international relations problems between US and China is the Taiwan issue. It is believed that Taiwan is an existing ally of the US, which angered Beijing. Based on previous China's pronouncements, it is ready to fire missiles just in case there is an uncontrolled and enormous military provocation from Taiwan. North Korea will take the opportunity to take control or completely destroy South Korea while the US and China are at war. Thus, America might lose its ally. It is known to the world that North Korea is a strong ally of Beijing, and has been one of its primary goals is to take charge of the whole Korean peninsula. Tendency is in the midst of a US-China war, the North might take the opportunity to advance to the South, either to take over or devastate the South, particularly Seoul, without even needing to use its weapons of mass destruction. It is believed that the North Korean military has a wide number of rocket launchers and artillery pieces within range of Seoul that could kill hundreds of thousands of South Koreans in the opening day of such invasion. A worst case scenario is possibly the North would use every type of weapon of mass destruction it has if the United States would come to South Korea's aid amidst its war with China. Any potential war between the US and China, Russia certainly will be in the picture. Beware of Russia, US. Russia plays a vital role in the US-China relations. Russia has an objective interest in a possible US-China conflict. Russian economy depends on the export of oil, and any conflict arises between US and China will have a direct impact on its oil trade to Europe and Asia. And since Russia is one of the strong allies of Communist China, possible that Russia will join China against the United States. Another great effect of the possible war will bring the world into deep recession to depression that will make United States and China face to suffer. Will America ready for a worse depression? Definitely a war between these two largest economies in the world will bring down to effect in global economies and various businesses, crash dramatically the stock market, plunge the world into deep depression, worse than World War II, and expect great famine and possible civil war to every corner of the world. Furthermore, these two superpowers, the United States and China, have this we call mutual interdependence. We can say China's economy, particularly its principal export markets and sources of advanced technologies, it still depends on America and its allies, particularly the European Union, United Kingdom, and Japan. Since China's trade to GDP ratio is about 53%, we can definitely conclude that China's dependence on international markets is likely very high. As most of its commodity inputs are shipped by the sea, such as oil and iron ore, China would be extremely suffer from a naval blockade by the US and its allies in case of a war in the South China Sea. Likewise to say that the United States also needs China in terms of China's low-cost manufacturing sector. The US also depends on China on its own exports, in which by record China is America's third largest major export market. Taking a big note how America is depending on China's money to fund its budget deficits. Currently, China is the largest foreign holder of US Treasury securities, almost amounting to a hefty $1.1 trillion in direct ownership. America needs to check future war losses. Let us check the GDP of the United States with its $21.42 trillion in 2019, and China's GDP is about $14.4 trillion in 2019. Okay, counting the long-term cost of a US-China war over South China Sea from pre-war arms race to post-war, how much would it be? Easily trillions of dollars, and it might eat all up United States GDP and research. Would that total amount of resources of the South China Sea suffice to cover up the losses of America just in case they will win the war? US-China war will definitely destabilize the Southeast Asian region. Once there's a US-China military escalation in the South China Sea, the Southeast Asian countries will either align with the United States against China or China against the US to suit its interests, or become neutral, or will fight for any foreign aggression. But overall, any possible war between the two giants will result to massive diplomatic row, maritime disputes, and destabilization in the said region. Another scenario is the United States might inflict the Philippines to war. There is no doubt that America and the Philippines have long diplomatic ties. There is a US-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty signed in 1951, which stipulates that either nation will respond militarily in the event of an external attack on the other. That means both nations would support each other if either the Philippines or the United States are attacked by an external party. In addition to the said treaty, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement signed by both countries allows US forces access to and use of designated areas and facilities owned and controlled by the armed forces of the Philippines at the invitation of the Philippines government. Therefore, if a US-China war broke out, the US will possibly use Philippines as a temporary military base, thus eventually making Philippines drawn into a shooting war. Worst scenario that the world is avoiding just in case the two superpowers collide in the South China Sea is World War III. That might lead to nuclear war, to human extinction. Is America prepared for complete human destruction? If nuclear war happens, it will have such terrifying consequences that include mass extinction. We all know that if both countries will resort first to using intercontinental ballistic missiles, it will kill tens of millions of civilians. How about if weapons of mass destruction is involved? Definitely hundreds of millions of human lives will perish. Let's take a deeper look into this scenario. There is a chance that such conflict will cause World War III. Why? China would have to confront not the US alone, but also America's Asian allies, particularly Japan, then other European countries, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and perhaps India. On the other hand, China is not lonely in this war. Its two major powers allies Russia and North Korea might join the war, and some lesser allies that includes Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Pakistan and Mongolia. We are anticipating a possible Indo-Pacific coalition versus Eurasian alliance, and take note, it is possible other allies emerge while US and China are in the midst of war. A United States possible cultivation of dispute with China in the South China Sea is dangerously unwise. America can go to war with China anytime it wants, but is it justifiable at all costs? From our point of view, the balance of power in the South China Sea must be strongly established. Thus, the presence of the United States naval power in the said region is necessary, and China should not see this as a direct provocation to its claims and military power. The United States and its allies, the Southeast Asian countries, and China, primarily goal in the South China Sea, must be realistic, strategized, diplomatic, mutual economic benefit international relations with a binding bilateral agreement, and above all peace, and not definitely provocations nor war. That's all for today, and we hope you did enjoy our video. Thank you very much for watching. please drop a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to get new video updates. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook. Stay tuned always. Till next time. Bye.